Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and apparently very full of myself, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, Rob casting at you. You, my imagination connoisseurs, you, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, episode number 469, Lamau. Let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you something about how I feel about certain things. That's what I do on this show. That's why it's called Robservations. You know what I think? I think people are too good looking in entertainment these days. I was a child. I grew up in the 70s, pretty much, 70s and 80s. But in the 70s, the stars of movies, like you'd have Gene Hackman playing Popeye Doyle. You'd have Roy Scheider, somebody I actually think is rather attractive. He's an attractive man, but not traditionally like chiseled jaw, like Rock Hudson or pick your favorite matinee idol, Troy Donahue. I don't know. Roy Scheider was not that dude. I mean, he was second fiddle in French Connection, but he was front and center as Chief Brody in Jaws, and he's in one of my favorite movies. He's the star of All That Jazz, playing Bob Fosse, basically. I love movies of the 70s. They had peak verisimilitude then. You had a lot of filmmakers like William Friedkin coming out of documentary films that became feature filmmakers, and they would use their documentary style and apply it to filmmaking, which, to me, created verisimilitude like we'd never seen before. Lighting, for instance. Pretty incredible stuff. Incredible stuff going on. I'm sorry, I am schwitzing because I came in from outside. But I liked that. I mean, growing up in the 70s, when you watched movies, people seemed real. Like you watched a movie like Network. Everybody in it. Faye Dunaway, beautiful woman, but a beautiful woman that looked also real, if that makes sense. I remember the first time I saw Meryl Streep in the theater. It was in The Deer Hunter. I hadn't seen, like, Manhattan yet, but I saw The Deer Hunter in the theater, and I thought that a young Meryl Streep was very beautiful, very striking, but not like Christy Brinkley striking, not like Farrah Fawcett Major striking. She looked beautiful, but she also added to the verisimilitude of the tapestry of The Deer Hunter because she didn't look like your typical, I guess you'd call her California beauty. And I like that about movies. I think part of the when you talk about verisimilitude, you have to cast people that add to the reality of movies. And I think in the 70s you had that. You had a move away from the traditional matinee idol. Now that's always been true. You know, there's always been people in films that have not been traditionally handsome, but there's something about them that looks like they belong. They inhabit the stories that they're in. I mean, I can't imagine anyone other than Humphrey Bogart playing Rick Blaine in Casablanca. I mean, come on. Now, Humphrey Bogart might not have been your traditional leading man, maybe not like, say, a dashing Clark Gable, but I don't think anyone would deny that you can't imagine Casablanca with anyone else in the lead role but him. And that's one of the things that I think is great about movies. When I directed my first film, my only film, one of the things that we did was we had our casting director, Linda Francis, open up casting not just from agencies but to anyone. And so we were deluged. I think I got 10,000. I kid you not. I'm saying actually 10,000 headshots. And one of the things that we did at the end of the day was the mailman, first of all, hated us. Now it's all done online, so you don't have to do that anymore. I mean, you still have to have headshots, but you don't have to send a headshot to somebody. But we would open them up, and I would look through stacks of headshots. Lots of beautiful people. A lot of really great-looking people. But most of them, you look at them, and you're like, you know, this is a really pretty guy, good-looking dude, or a beautiful woman. And you look at them, and you're like, they're beautiful, but they don't have that thing. That thing that you want to see on screen. Like one of my favorite actors is John Lithgow. John Lithgow was in All That Jazz. He was in one of my favorite movies, The World According to Garp. You know, John Lithgow is not necessarily the most traditionally handsome man, but he's unique. He has something that leaps off when you see him on camera. There's something about him, his face, his uniqueness, that he belongs there. And I love that. I think that's great. Now, when it comes to, say, today, say you're going to hire somebody to play Thor, right? Thor's got to look like the god of thunder. Now, traditionally, human beings don't necessarily look like that unless you make it your job to look like a thunder god every day if you're going to work out. So when you cast someone like Thor, first of all, you find an incredibly handsome man that looks like everyone's Nordic Superman, the idea of what Thor should look like. You find a guy like an Australian, like Chris Hemsworth, very handsome man. But even when he was cast, I mean, he's tall, he has a great voice. When he was cast, he didn't have the arms for Thor. How is he going to lift Mjolnir? I mean, how do you do that? You got to look like you can lift that thing. So what does even a man as pretty as Chris Hemsworth, who is that charismatic, that good looking, what does he have to do? Oh, he has to start on a grueling, horrific nutritional and workout regimen that is going to transform him into the character that we need to see, because audiences the world over, men, women, young, old, however you identify, whatever you are, what you want to see in the role of Thor is a humanoid that looks basically perfect. But the thing is, that ideal that has been drawn on the pages of comic books for so long doesn't exist. If you want to look like a comic book character, you want to look like you leapt off the pages of or out of a Walt Simonson drawing, there's work involved. And in the case of someone like Chris Hemsworth or Hugh Jackman's going to be ripped and play Wolverine and Logan, it's 6 months worth of grueling work, day in, day out. I don't know if they have cheat days. Probably not. I mean, even their cheat days become grueling because you're like, oh my God, I can't cheat. I can't imagine the psychological discipline. I mean, they're getting paid to do it, so it's part of their job to look that way. But let's face it, part of Endgame, a big part of Endgame that a lot of fans didn't like, was about Chris Hemsworth, was about Thor getting fat. Fat Thor. Fat Thor was a thing. Nobody liked Fat Thor. I thought it was a pretty audacious way to take the character, and I say kudos to the Russo brothers, kudos to Kevin Feige, kudos to Marvel, and kudos to Disney, but most of all, kudos to Chris Hemsworth. Admittedly, he put on a fat suit, but still, the idea that he's going to be walking around, that Chris Hemsworth is going to be walking around with literally a beer belly and completely subvert our idea of what the Thunder God should be, and at the end, what lesson do we learn? Fat Thor can be just as powerful and just as effective as beautiful I've worked out for 6 months before I started shooting this movie Thor. But nobody wants to see Fat Thor stay fat because we're watching a movie about superheroes. And I don't want to watch that. I feel better about my life when Thor himself has done all the working out that I should do. Like, I can look at Thor and go, I might have sagging man boobs in my middle age, but you know what? If there's a man like Chris Hemsworth on the planet Earth, I feel good about mankind. People want to look at awesome people when you look at movies. Movies are a heightened reality. Now, the key is, as I've said, I think that reality has been shattered. I think people have become too good looking in movies and TV today. I mean, remember when, you probably don't, but when I was a kid, Charlie's Angels came out. And there was 3 Charlie's Angels, the original Charlie's Angels, Jacqueline Smith, Kate Jackson, and Farrah Fawcett Majors. And Kate Jackson was the less pretty of the 3, but she was like the coolest and the smartest. And I think the reason they did that, and by the way, she was beautiful too, but not as matinee idol or pin-up centerfold beautiful as Farrah Fawcett Majors or Jacqueline Smith. But Kate Jackson was the girl that you wanted to marry. But that's why it was a genius bit of casting. 3 beautiful women, but different kinds of beauty. And it still worked. It was offbeat. It was interesting. It made that show work. Now, Was Charlie's Angels a sexist show? Hell yes, it was. It was designed around putting hot chicks in the role of police officers, which was not something you saw on television. It was absolutely designed to do that very thing. Because you know what? When you cast people in movies and TV, there is a heightened reality there. And I think that, unfortunately, whether you want to admit this or not, all of us, I don't care how you identify. You know, Willow Yang's mom. Love Willow Yang, love her mother, haven't met her mother. But even Willow Yang's mom, as an immigrant coming over from China, when she watches a Western film, she wants people to see, she wants people to look beautiful. You know, she doesn't want to see ordinary. She wants to see heightened reality. Actually an Academy Award-winning musician from India, I won't say who it is, I'll let you guess, watched Tango Shalom, the movie I produced and edited. Really liked it. But in the movie, there's a Sikh wedding. And his big criticism of the film was the people at the Sikh wedding weren't pretty enough because he's used to watching Bollywood cinema. He works in Bollywood cinema. Everybody's, beautiful. And he said that bothered him. And I didn't say this because I didn't talk to him, but the director, Gabe Bologna, was like, yeah, but this movie's set on the streets of New York. It has to look real. And we went to a real Sikh temple, and they really staged a wedding for us. Real people. And it adds to the verisimilitude. It adds to the atmosphere of everything. That's the whole point. You believe, at least I hope you believe in our movie because the people look like they're supposed to. And I get it. Like on television, I watch TV now, especially like teen movies or teen comedies. Everyone's like too pretty. And it really started to bother me. I'll tell you when the first time I noticed this was. It was when I saw the movie She's All That. Freddie Prinze Jr. and Rachel Lee Cook. And there's a scene when they go to the beach. And Rachel Lee Cook is supposed to be this kind of nerdy girl that nobody pays attention to. And she's like wearing a one-piece bathing suit to the beach. And she's like not wearing her glasses. And clearly, I'm like, come on. Rachel Lee Cook was phenomenally hot. Like, anyone's going to notice this. Yet she's supposed to be not hot, like, compared to everyone else. I don't like that. I mean, I don't believe it. I'm like, come on, man. If you're going to cast that role, I think one of the most genius castings of any teen film of all time was Molly Ringwald in Pretty in Pink. Now, obviously, John Hughes liked Molly Ringwald. She was a great actress. They worked together on 16 Candles. But when she was in Pretty in Pink, she was supposed to be the object of Ducky's affections. She was offbeat and interesting looking. Maybe not a traditional centerfold beauty, but there was something about Molly Ringwald, something about her face, very unique, very compelling. You can't take your eyes off her, and you love her for it. You love her for it, and a guy like Ducky is, of course, going to fall in love with Molly Ringwald. So it works. If they had put like a Farrah Fawcett Majors or a Cheryl Ladd, a Charlie's Angel in the central role of Pretty in Pink, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked. So what you want to do is you got to pick the right people. You got to pick the right people to bring that verisimilitude to the role. Now, here's the thing. When you're writing stories, when you're storytelling, we as storytellers, we who are behind the camera, unfortunately, when you're casting, I was literally looking at headshots of people and flipping through them, no. I was dismissing people outright. Looking at beautiful people. I'd be like, no, not right. That's what you're doing. There's no reason why it was totally objective. It was totally subjective on my part. I was being totally subjective. What I liked, what I think somebody else their mileage may vary. But I was doing that and just tossing it. And in a way, I'm still talking about it today. 22 years later, it still haunts me. It haunts me. It always haunts me. When I was casting for Femme Fatales, you'd sit into a casting session, and Femme Fatales, obviously a Skinamax show. You saw a litany, literally a litany of beautiful women walking in and out. You're trying to find the one that works best for you. They're all beautiful. but you want to find a great actress. And that's beautiful. That looks the part. Sometimes I would cast people that I really liked, and then HBO wouldn't like them. I'd be like, what? Well, they only saw an image or a tape. They didn't see what I saw in the room. So you'd have to make a compromise. But Hollywood sucks like that. It's a horrible, difficult place to work, especially if you're an actor. It's always rejection. And it's hard, man. And then when you're making a show, say you're making a fantasy show, like a superhero movie maybe, people got to look good. You can't making movies about superheroes, well, there's an expectation there. Not everybody can hack it. I mean, I'd love to look like Chris Evans or Chris Hemsworth or even Robert Downey Jr. I mean, look at how ripped Ant-Man got. Look at how ripped our boy got for being Ant-Man. He was ripped. He doesn't look like that in real life. Paul Rudd is not. Maybe he does. I don't know. But Paul Rudd, he got ripped. That's part of the job. I mean, look at Christian Bale. He went full on Patrick Bateman to be Batman again. That could not have been easy. I filmed Brandon Routh's workout in Australia. Brandon Routh, nice guy, but man, to become Superman, he got huge. He bulked up. He busted his ass 7 days a week. And still people were like, oh, he's too thin, or oh, he doesn't have enough muscles. That guy was unbelievably yoked. I mean, he was awesome because he had to be. He had to be. No one likes when Michael Keaton, the old bat suit for Tim Burton's Batman, but still, that's what people expect. Now, both men and women are held to impossibly high standards when they're making movies because they have to be. Movies are larger than life. Movies are not activism, they're storytelling. And I've always said the Burnett axiom is never put your universe, never put your agenda before your characters or your story, because that's what matters. That's what you got to do. That said, I read an article yesterday about Star Trek. An article by someone who has written about Star Trek before, and I've read her articles. And I wondered, it was on Gizmodo, and the article, well, let's look at it, shall we? And I decided to talk about it today. Here it is. Here's the article. The Sexist Legacy in Star Trek's Progressive Universe. Okay. In the 4th episode of Star Trek, by the way, this is by Eleanor Tremere, and Eleanor Tremere has written a lot about Star Trek from a certain perspective. But I think whatever Eleanor writes is worth reading. I've quite enjoyed her commentary, and I do read her articles. And I was sent this yesterday, and I thought I would talk about it today. In the 4th episode of Star Trek Picard, a familiar face storms onto the scene. With plenty of legacy characters, this might be another day at the space office, but this is 7 of 9. Beloved, iconic, even more badass than she was during her time on Voyager, and she was always pretty badass. You owe me a ship, Picard, she quips, after saving the crew in a space battle, and the episode cuts to black. Over 20 years after the USS Voyager returned to the Alpha Quadrant, in Picard, 7 is now a hardened vigilante, chucking back whiskey and cursing under her breath. And she has an outfit to match, strutting around in the licensed badass combination of combat boots, jeans, a loose shirt, and, of course, a leather jacket, which, by the way, is some people's version of perfection. Gone, finally, is the skin-tight catsuit that 7 donned on Voyager. Gone, finally. A clear invitation to see 7 as a person first and a woman second, standing in stark contrast to that rib-crushing corset. With Picard 7 of 9 upending her late 90s incarnation, we're forced to confront the stumbles of Star Trek's past. In 2020, what can we learn from looking back at Trek, and with all the strides it made for female representation, can we really call it sexist? Well, I would say that you should remember when Star Trek debuted in 1966, the portrayal of women was very different than most things on television, something you should never take away from the franchise. You had women that were smart, Sure. Was there cheesecake on the show? Psst, absolutely. That was par for the course for any television show. It's not like Barbara Eden in I Dream of Jeannie wore a pantsuit. But that was what the climate was at the time. We have to look back and take that into consideration. But Star Trek had amazing portrayals of females in the 3 years of the original series. Yes, did it have certain elements of Kirk finding a woman to bed down with in a lot of episodes? Yes, it did. But a lot of the episodes had the people that Kirk liked were scientists or captains, or actually Spock liked the ship captain. But they were very capable women for the most part. And that itself was a very revolutionary act to portray women that way in the future. That was part of what Gene Roddenberry thought we would all have. And that everybody would have opportunities, male, female, all different ethnicities. So don't take that away from Star Trek. But anyway, with Picard 7 of 9 upending her late 90s incarnation, we are forced to confront the stumbles of Star Trek's past. In 2020, what we can learn from looking back at Trek and with all the strides it made for female representation, can we really call it sexist? A new frontier for women. Women in Star Trek have always had a strong presence, have always been given complex characterizations, and have ostensibly been treated as equals by both their peers and the utopian society that surrounded them, which makes sense, as equal representation was always a core tenet of this frontier-busting space opera. When the very first Star Trek launched onto the airwaves, Gene Roddenberry's utopian vision had led him to position a woman on the bridge, and originally this wasn't Uhura. Star Trek's first pilot episode was produced in 1965, and it featured a woman as the first officer. Known only as Number One, Majel Barrett's character was a commanding presence on the bridge, a little too commanding for test audiences and NBC. According to Roddenberry, it was the women in the test audience that really reacted badly to Number One, thinking her too assertive. When the original series was reconceived with Kirk at the helm, Number One was gone. It would take Trek another 2 shows and 3 decades to finally cast a woman as first officer. Now, I would say, after reading that paragraph, that would it take Star Trek that long, or would it take the society that Star Trek was made in to allow that to finally happen and be accepted by audiences? Because Star Trek would have done it. It wasn't Star Trek that didn't want to do that. Star Trek did cast a woman as Number One, and as it's been said right here in this article, it was the actual female members of the audience, because the world hadn't caught up to that idea yet. Certainly not the world of 1965. Without Number One, the women of the original Star Trek were very much of their time. Nurse Chapel, Barrett's new role, was subservient to Dr. McCoy. She was a nurse. Nurse Chapel, who, by the way, she's an MD by Star Trek The Motion Picture. She was an equal of Dr. McCoy, and she's even shown as being an equal while the movie is running. So I don't know. I've never heard anyone call a nurse subservient to a doctor, but okay. And Uhura, a pioneer of African-American representation, nonetheless had far fewer lines than her male counterparts. Speaking to IO9, the Next Generation's Marina Sirtis is frank in her assessment of Trek's female representation. The fact that she was on the bridge as a black woman was it. They had knocked down so many walls just to put Uhura on the bridge. She didn't have much to do, but she was there. That's correct, because change is incremental. It's evolutionary. It doesn't happen the way we want it to happen. You've got to do it as you can do it. And they did it back when they probably, couldn't have. Other shows probably never could have gotten away with what Star Trek got away with, because it was a science fiction adventure show set in the future. So, anyway, I'm editorializing. I'm not totally. That's not fair to the article. Of course, Star Trek wasn't just trapped by the 60s. By 1986, new life was breathed into the franchise by the Next Generation, whose fresh-faced crew included not 1, not 2, but 3 women. These were the compassionate. Actually, 1987 was when Next Generation debuted, although the show was in production in the early stages in 86, whose fresh-faced crew included not 1, but 2, but 3 women. These were the compassionate Counselor Troy, the humanitarian Dr. Beverly Crusher, and the daring Lieutenant Tasha Yar, who in particular was of a new mold. Taking up the traditionally masculine role of security chief, Tasha was inspired by Alien's character Vasquez to emulate the modern woman. It was an interesting time, the 80s, said Denise Crosby, who portrayed Yar, getting nostalgic as she describes what made her character a touchstone for the age. Women were defining themselves not in terms of how they should be perceived, but how they wanted to be perceived. Crosby identified with this movement, which Gene Roddenberry found refreshing. Here I was with this short boy's haircut, which wasn't really seen on TV, and he said, I like this. This is a great look. So I was part of that wave of change, and I think it was impactful. Now here's the thing. Creators like Gene Roddenberry, when they're thinking about their creations or what they want to do, sometimes they make decisions that aren't necessarily reflective of who they are as people or what their personal appetites might be, but what's best for the show. They're able to disassociate themselves from their own predilections and actually think, okay, in this context, this seems like it would work. Having long hair as a security officer might be a little, it might hinder your job. Nothing to do with gender or sexuality or anything else. It's just a pragmatic thing if you're going to be getting in fights or firefights or whatever. Anyway, women were defining themselves not in terms of how they should be perceived, but how they wanted to be perceived. Crosby identified with this movement, which Gene Roddenberry found refreshing. Here I was with this short boy's haircut, which wasn't really seen on TV, and he said, I like this. It's easy to spot echoes of Tasha Yar and other iconic women of sci-fi. From Stargate's Sam Carter to Battlestar Galactica's Kara Starbuck Thrace, shades of Yar rippled through sci-fi for years to come. Yet there is an edge of poignancy to why Yar was so significant. Sure, she made waves as a straight-talking woman in a man's role, but her character impact was both cemented and cut short by her untimely death, the circumstances which we'll get back to later. Interesting that she chooses to use these words in writing this article. She made waves as a straight-talking woman in a man's role. Well, I would say that Star Trek did that a lot. They always put, they were progressive in that way. And in Star Trek, in terms of being the head of security, maybe it was, you can say that, but Star Trek did it, you know, and they didn't call attention to it. It was interesting that she was this head of security, but it wasn't, she was just the head of security. No one said, well, it's interesting that you're a head of security because you're a woman. No. On the Enterprise D in the 24th century, she just was, because she had earned that role. With Yar gone, the women of the next generation fit more snugly into classic feminine molds, as Marina Sirtis reminisces. They got it right. They cast a woman as the security chief, but Denise left, and the two remaining women were in caring professions. So it was okay to be on a spaceship as a woman, but you had to be a nurturer. Speaking to IO9, Gates McFadden is scathing about the few times the women would be thrown together, not to work together, but to gossip. If the ladies did have a scene together, we were dressed up in leotards talking about men. We weren't sharing opinions on a medical issue. That was in one episode, and she's not wrong about that. Over the ensuing years, Troy and Crusher would slowly get more screen time as their characters became more nuanced, but they would rarely get the chance to break out of their nurturer molds. And with Crosby gone, security chief wasn't the only new position that needed filling. I was never supposed to be the chick on the show, the va-va-voom. That was supposed to be Denise, Sirtis told us. For as progressive as Star Trek tried to be with its women, every show had something in common. There had to be a hot chick. Well, I would say that that's also something that, well, entertainment in general has to have. It also has to have a hot dude. And I would like to point out that William Shatner, as the lead of the original Star Trek, was a man who always wore a toupee on the show, and by the third season also was wearing, well, something to augment his expanding girth, as was Jonathan Frakes. People want to watch good-looking people in entertainment. This is not something new. This is not something that is only relegated to women. It's also the same thing with dudes. That's why superhero actors spend 6 months starving themselves or eating a very regimented diet and work out in the gym every day to become an impossible specimen of humanity, something that is impossible to keep up with without that kind of a regimen. Is that fair? Is that sexist? I think not. I think that's just what storytelling requires. When we see somebody who's supposed to be larger than life, like, say, the crew of the Enterprise, we want to aspire to be them. They're better than we are. They're better than we are. Star Trek is about the best of the best. If you're out on the final frontier, if you're not the best representation of humanity, you shouldn't be there. That was the whole point. And if you look at what's really interesting, you look at DeForest Kelley, not a traditionally handsome man, but perfect for the role. Perfect for the role. Can you imagine anyone else as Dr. McCoy? I thought Carl Urban in Star Trek '09, while great in the role, was far too handsome to be Dr. McCoy. I thought it was distracting. Leonard Nimoy and Spock. I mean, Leonard Nimoy as Spock. Leonard Nimoy, also handsome man, but offbeat. However, how many slash fiction stories did he inspire? Who got the most fan mail on Star Trek from women? Leonard Nimoy did. You wouldn't expect it from a franchise renowned for its socially progressive attitude, and yet every series had its sex symbol. That's because it's entertainment. That's part of what we're watching. It was an action-adventure show, Curtis remarks dryly. There has to be a girl for the boys to look at when they're not blowing up spaceships. There also has to be a guy for the boys to look at, too. You think I don't look at Chris Hemsworth admiringly? I look at handsome dudes as well and think, I want to look like that dude. And you know what? Looking at Hugh Jackman's ass in Days of Future Past on Disney Plus, I'm like, that guy's got a great ass. Chris Evans, he's got America's ass. And I like looking at it because he looks great. So both men and women all want to look at people that look good. And if you don't identify as a man or a woman, if you're non-binary, I'll bet you have people you like to look at too. And some of them are men and women. Of course they are. We all like to look at hot people. This is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's part of entertainment. That's movies and TV. We're looking at people that don't look like us. That's what makes it fun. So who is the Star Trek babe? She's got to be young, thin, and pretty. Her outfit will be more form-fitting than the others, making much of her curves. And of course, one babe trumps them all, and this would be 7 of 9, the ex-Borg who joined Voyager at the tail end of its 3rd season. Elevated on 4-inch heels, actor Jerry Ryan was sewn into her catsuit every day, which consisted of a boned corset topped with breast mounds. Truly a feat of engineering. Even at the time, Seven's outfit was the cause of much discussion, which is exactly what the network intended. 7 of 9 is probably one of the sexiest characters I've ever seen on TV. This was how Conan O'Brien introduced Ryan on his show in 1998, tapping into the precise reason she was added to Voyager. As the audience whooped, Conan asked why on earth her character would wear such a thing. "It's medicinal," Ryan explained, tongue firmly in cheek. Conan quickly retorted, "It's medicinal for me." Yeah, you know what? Because we're all human beings. And yes, Jerry Ryan was added to Voyager because Voyager was not the success that everyone thought it was going to be, and they needed to do something to appeal to the fan base. And you know what? When you're making a science fiction fantasy show, what better way to... the fan base isn't exactly 50-50. It is now, perhaps, but back then, not so much. Seven's introduction to Voyager was calculated. In the shadow of the hugely influential Next Generation and competing with Deep Space Nine, the newest Trek spinoff wasn't doing as well as the network had hoped. Premiering with over 13 million viewers, Voyager's ratings almost halved to 7 million in the first season and continued to dwindle. By season 3, the average was 4.6. This was a much sharper drop-off than Deep Space Nine, which averaged 8 million views across its first 4 seasons. CBS wanted more from Voyager. Well, at the time, CBS didn't want anything from Voyager because it was syndicated on UPN. Actually, it wasn't syndicated. It was on UPN, United Paramount Network. And with the inclusion of a new character, they saw a chance to not just boost their ratings, but to break into the mainstream. In the years since, Ryan has described the scores of publicity meetings that were held about 7 of 9. She was interviewed dozens of times by the media, with her pinup-worthy promo pics splashed across magazines and newspaper supplements, including one particularly memorable crossover with fellow 90s genre babe Xena's Lucy Lawless. It was always a ratings thing, Ryan told IO9, and the viewership increased a lot when they added 7. While Seven's costume continues to be the main talking point, Google her name today and you'll find hundreds of articles discussing catsuit ethics. Ryan thinks there's another reason why the character boosted Voyager's ratings. She's brilliantly written. That's right, and she was a Borg. So, okay, I think the quality of the show improved because she introduced rich storylines to explore with other characters. It revitalized the show. That is correct. You know, even the most well, the most male of your audience is not going to watch a show just because a hot girl's on it. That could certainly pique my interest, but if the writing isn't good, if the storytelling isn't good, I'm not going to watch. And I'll tell you something, Voyager became more interesting when Jerry Ryan came on. It also added more of the Borg, which was traditionally something that Star Trek would do when they needed marquee appeal. That's why they made Star Trek First Contact. While Seven's, hang on, 7 of 9 is the perfect storm, a character that grabs attention with her appearance, then holds it with her story. And it worked. Even today, 7-centric episodes pull in the most viewers. According to Netflix, the most rewatched Star Trek episodes featured Voyager more than any other show. Though of those episodes, all but 2 highlight Seven's journey. Scorpion is her introduction. The Gift features her clashing with Janeway. Dark Frontier is all about her connection to the Borg. Even Endgame, the show's finale, features Seven in a pivotal role. This was why Ryan didn't mind the catsuit. I didn't have a problem with her overtly sexy appearance, many would say gratuitously so, because it was the complete antithesis of the character. She was oblivious to that. Yet there is something sinister in this divorcing of Seven from her sex appeal, as it robs her of any autonomy over the sexual attraction her costume invites. What would have been different if she were a sexual being donning the catsuit to be intentionally provocative? Would she still be as beloved? I don't know, because she was assimilated as a child. That was her character. In reality, Seven's lack of concern for her appearance allows viewers to enjoy their voyeurship of Seven without feeling uncomfortable. Don't worry, audiences. Seven only dresses that way because she has no idea what sex is. The catsuit's medicinal, remember? Seven is an inactive and oblivious participant in her sexualization, tiptoes around the ship in a costume so tight that her actor had to lie down between takes just to get her breath back, and it was the men in her life, both in fiction and behind the scenes of Voyager, who made this decision for her. Yes, she was an actress on a TV show. The knock-on effects of sexism. All of this seems pretty paradoxical. After all, Star Trek's writing of women steadily improved from the Next Generation onwards. Deep Space Nine women broke out of traditional female roles. Kira Nerys, Nana Visitor, was given plenty of screen time as the show delved into her development arc, while Jadzia Dax, Terry Farrell, challenged social boundaries as, arguably, Trek's first canonically queer character. But was she queer? I mean, the real question is, if you're a symbiote, and you're put into both genders, male and female bodies, over the course of your lifetime, I would say that's part of that's normal. So would you be queer? I mean, we would perceive that character as queer, but I don't think that a Trill would call themselves queer. I would say that it's just normal to be. Sometimes in my life, I've been a man. Sometimes I've been a woman. And as a man, I was married to a woman. And as a woman, if I'm in the host body that is a woman and I meet my ex-wife, which is actually what happened, there's still love there. Are you going to, I mean, Trills, we change bodies all the time, our human hosts. So I wouldn't call me queer. I would say that I'm a normal Trill. That's kind of what the point was, is that our perceptions of what she was doing, it was on us. It was our problem, and they were trying to change that, but okay. But it was Voyager that took female representation one step further, finally featuring a female captain in the lead role. Why then did Voyager also feature a woman so objectified that we're still talking about it decades later? Because the ratings weren't good, and they were doing something to bolster the ratings. And traditionally, Star Trek had a pretty big male audience, and they were hoping to bring more men into watching the show. Now, things are different now, but at the time, this was a decision that was made. It's not exactly a hard decision to fathom. Remember, well, hang on, I'll talk about that in a minute. Perhaps Voyager's sexism isn't in spite of its otherwise feminist approach, but because of it. Was it sexist? From a business standpoint, to bring in somebody you wanted to pull in viewers, is that sexist, or is that good business? I mean, you have to ask yourself, this is entertainment, and we want to see beautiful people in entertainment. That's what we do. That's how we cast people. You cast people in roles that you think other people would like to watch. And is that sexist, or is that just appealing to the baser instincts of human nature, which is really what drives entertainment in the first place? At the start, Voyager's publicity focused on the novelty of a female captain, but as the ratings dwindled, the producers grew concerned that this wasn't enough to hold viewers' interest, and perhaps it was putting people off. Interviewed by the Television Academy in 2006, executive producer Rick Berman explained why Seven was added to the show. We wanted Janeway to be a Starfleet captain, but we also wanted her to be feminine, and those two things don't go hand in hand. If you look at female military officers who make it to the rank of admiral, they tend not to be babes. We cast a woman in her 40s, but we still wanted a feminine woman. The addition of Babe to offset the feminism of Voyager might have improved ratings, but it put a significant strain on the cast, creating a work environment filled with tension. Up until Seven's introduction, Janeway was the clear star of the show, with Kate Mulgrew giving dozens of interviews and appearing on the covers of magazines. Yet with Ryan came a seismic shift. Now it was all about the sexy young woman who was spotlighted as though she were the show's lead. After all, Lucy Lawless was the star of her own show, and yet that 1999 TV Guide feature presented Lawless and Ryan side by side rather than Lawless and Mulgrew. This caused immense tensions between the two actors. In the beginning, Kate's anger was not directed toward Jerry Ryan, it was directed toward the characters, says Garrett Wong, who played Harry Kim, told Closer in 2018. When the producers said no about getting rid of Seven, Kate kept complaining. Finally, her anger was turned toward the actress. That's when it became horrible. Mulgrew's conduct was so stressful that Ryan told Closer, she would feel nauseous before she arrived on set each day. I completely understand why. I get it. Believe me, but it was very difficult. Overall, this was, hang on a second. Overall, this was not my favorite work experience for that reason. Now, again, all of these things are true. And if you know anything about, say, Rick Berman and Brandon Braga, and I like them both, you know, they're dudes. They're dudes making a show. And they were trying to do everything they can to keep that show going. But they were also dealing with the realities of what their audience was what they were trying to get the audience. Were they right in doing these things? Probably not. Did they treat Kate Mulgrew correctly by doing this? No. But then again, part of the reason that Voyager didn't succeed as much as they would have wanted it to succeed is because it wasn't as different from Next Generation or Deep Space Nine. They didn't even accept their own premise. I mean, they basically turned it into another show that we'd seen with both the original series and Next Gen. It was a show made up of Star Trek tropes. And that's why it didn't succeed as well as they probably wanted it to at the time. Now people have gone back, even I have reassessed Voyager. I go back and watch it because I, to be honest, didn't watch every episode. Not at the time, not when it was on. Even without Mulgrew's actions, and by the way, Kate Mulgrew was the star of the show. She had the weight of the world on her shoulders the same way that William Shatner did in the original series. And when the original series was constantly not, it was never first, it was always second in the ratings. They didn't know demographics yet. They didn't judge demographics. So Shatner had to deal with the fact that Star Trek was never the success they hoped it would be, and it fell on his shoulders. And remember, Shatner was a guy who wore a toupee and also wore something that was helping him his gut out in the third season. So, you know, the same stresses that are put on female stars are put on male stars as well, to look good, to look palatable to the audience that demands perfection from their stars. Even without Mulgrew's actions, Ryan had enough to deal with just by wearing the catsuit. If I had to go to the bathroom, Ryan told IO9, it was a 20-minute production break. Everyone had to know over the radio. Someone had to dress me and undress me. This didn't just affect Ryan, but everyone on set, as another Voyager castmate who chose to remain anonymous commented to Closer. At one point, Kate pulled the line producer aside and said, Jerry Ryan is not allowed to use the bathroom unless she uses it before work or after work, but not during work. It takes too much time to get her in and out of that suit. With work days that often exceed 15 hours, this obviously wasn't feasible. This is a problem with the production. As a producer myself, you should never give an actor, any actor, male or female, a costume that they have a hard time getting in and out of that causes production. 15 minutes is a long time. That's a setup. And if somebody's causing a 15-minute delay simply because they have to pee, that's problematic. And that's on production. That's on the producers of the show. That should never have been the case. Although costumes are often difficult to deal with when clothing has been constructed to amplify sex appeal, there's an added strain to that actor's professional life. No one knows that better than Marina Sirtis, a survivor of anorexia and other eating disorders. Sirtis was under a huge pressure to lose weight in order to maintain her position as the next generation's babe. She told IO9, "I used to get phone calls from the producers telling me I was fat. They'd say, 'You look fat, and we pay you a lot of money to look good.' Think about it. I was a stick insect from all the nagging." For some actors, this toxic environment began before they even started shooting, as was the case for Terry Farrell, who played Jadzia Dax in Deep Space Nine. Interviewed for the book, Mark Altman's book, The 50-Year Mission, Farrell revealed that she found her costuming experience with Rick Berman to be very uncomfortable. He'd comment on your bra size, not being voluptuous. He would say, "Well, you're just flat. Look at Christine over there. She has perfect breasts." With Berman dissatisfied with Farrell's body, the costume department was called upon to fix the issue. I had to have fittings for Dax to have larger breasts, and then I had to go into Berman's office. The expectations of Sirtis, Ryan, and Farrell teach us nothing else. It's that the objectification of Star Trek's female characters doesn't just tarnish its ostensibly progressive reputation, it also created a difficult work environment. So in order to judge whether Star Trek is sexist, we have to look behind the scenes and discover what kind of culture leads to these decisions. Now, here's where I object to this article. What is on screen? What is on screen? What's on screen? What Star Trek? When we watch Star Trek, just as it is with any movie, the finished film is its own thing. And I think part of what we're dealing with now with the culture that we live in today is: are we going to judge the people that make these things? And are we going to then penalize the things that were made based on the people that made them? I would say that's a very interesting and a difficult question that I don't have all of the answers to. But I would say this: when you are making a TV show for a mass audience, Thor better look fucking good when he comes on set. That's part of the job. That's what you're paying them for. And if an actor has a problem with that, they should express that as they're getting cast. Because there's an expectation that is put on actors. That's part of their job. They have to look a certain way to play their parts. Rightly or wrongly, the fact of the matter is, we're human beings. And we want to look at certain kinds of people when we're watching our entertainment. That's who we are. Is that fair? Certainly not. Certainly not. It is not fair that I do not look like Chris Hemsworth. The genetic sweepstakes did not favor me the way they favored Chris Hemsworth. Is that fair? No. The universe is indifferent to your suffering. The universe doesn't care. But I want to see a guy like Chris Hemsworth play the Thunder God Thor. That's what I want for my entertainment. I want to escape. That's what it is. It's science fiction fantasy. It's fantasy. That's what you want. And if you as an actor are going to take that role, you've got to understand that. It's not like Star Trek, for all of its progression, did not have a litany of beautiful women parading across the screen during the 60s in the original series. Of course it did. But you know what? It's also the show that cast Diana Muldaur twice in the original series and then cast her as the older Dr. Pulaski who came in to replace Gates McFadden. So the producers of Star Trek were willing to give that a try. Did it all work out? No, but they still cast. They brought in Diana Muldaur, who is significantly older, twice as old as Gates McFadden at the time, or close to it, to play that character. So before you pillory everybody behind the scenes, there is a reality to our entertainment business, rightly or wrongly. And do I believe that we should create work environments that are non-hostile to everybody working in them? Of course I do. Having a hostile work environment, the worst place to be is when you're on a film set shooting. The last place you need to have to be a hostile work environment is a place like that. It's already hard enough. The one place that needs to be welcoming, you as a producer, you have to make sure that your actors are taken care of. I've talked about this a lot on the show. That's why you have makeup and hair people that can make our actors feel good. You don't want any kind of external strife to affect anyone on a movie set. So, anyway, The Boys Club. If the entertainment industry is dominated by men now, this was even more the case decades ago. Star Trek has had a few female writers and producers over the years. D.C. Fontana wrote for the original series The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. Jerry Taylor got her start producing The Next Generation before co-creating Voyager, to name just two immensely influential staffers. But as Curtis points out, Star Trek was a franchise created by men. Even though we were writing a show about the 24th century, apart from Jerry Taylor and Melinda Snodgrass, another writer, the writers and producers were all men, 20th century men, so it's not going to be that far-reaching. But it was still pretty far-reaching. We could argue, of course, that Star Trek was a product of its era, but the actors were aware at the time that the show could be better. This aggravated Gates McFadden as early as season 1 of Next Generation, as she revealed to IO9. I wondered, did the women exist for the men to react to? Even Wesley just reacted to his mother, not seeking out her counsel. For counsel, he sought out the men on the ship. Coming from academia, McFadden was used to a collaborative, creative environment. But she didn't encounter that behind the scenes in The Next Generation. Jonathan Frakes could bound into the producer's office and put his feet up, but I couldn't. That wasn't acceptable. That's a very valid criticism. And she's absolutely right. 100%. McFadden's opinions caused conflict with one producer in particular, especially when she pushed the point about Wesley. That's when I'd piss the writers off. I'd say, look, he only goes to the men for advice, and he never talks to her. I was passionate about it, and I alienated that producer, she said. Rick Berman later named Maurice Hurley as the producer in question, and the tension between Hurley and McFadden reached a boiling point toward the end of season 1. What I heard is he said either she goes or I go, as she revealed to IO9. McFadden wasn't officially given the reason for her firing, but learned the truth later on. So the choice was made and I went. When asked about McFadden's departure, Crosby gave IO9 her thoughts on the matter. Ultimately, it's the frustration of not being seen and not being heard. No question, it's a gender dynamic, and it's still happening. She's absolutely correct, 100%. But this is behind the scenes, and it's not good. It wasn't good for anybody. It's no way to work, and it shouldn't ever happen. And McFadden wasn't the only one whose conflict with... Oh, let me just say, do you know how Gates McFadden got back on the show? Well, they brought in Dinah Muldaur to play Catherine Pulaski. And Dinah Muldaur was, while I think a phenomenal actress, and I think she did a great job as Catherine Pulaski, she had a real life. She had a husband. She had a world. 15-hour days were not her thing. And obviously, the rest of the cast was not her. They weren't necessarily her biggest fans. But it was Patrick Stewart who got Gates McFadden to come back. They needed her back. Patrick Stewart was the one, really the prime mover to get Gates McFadden back, which you can find out if you watch our documentaries on the making of Star Trek The Next Generation on the Blu-ray release of that series. McFadden wasn't the only one whose conflict with producers led to an early departure. Toward the end of Deep Space Nine Season 6, Terry Farrell's contract was up. Wanting to pursue other projects, Farrell tried to open negotiations for a reduced role in the final season, similar to the contract Colin Meaney had for the duration of the show. But she clashed with Berman on this issue, as she commented on in the 50-year mission. He was trying to bully me into saying yes. He was convinced that my cards were going to fold and I was going to sign. He had another producer come up to me and say, if you weren't here, you wouldn't be working at Kmart. Recounting the issue for the documentary What We Left Behind, Farrell tearfully protests her character's exit. I didn't want to die, but there was a point where I was like, don't dismiss me. Talk to me. Ultimately, Farrell was never given the option to renegotiate her contract, so she left the show, leaving Dax brutally murdered in DS9's Bajoran Shrine. Was that a good thing? Nope. It wasn't a good thing. Are producers sometimes heartless? Yes. Again, Hollywood is a horrible, horrible, terrible, awful place to try and make a living. It always has been. I don't expect it to change anytime soon. Of course, this wasn't the only time that a woman's request for contract renegotiations led to her character's death. The same was true of Denise Crosby, who was frustrated with Tasha Yar's lack of involvement in The Next Generation Season 1. I would also like to point out, so was Michael Dorn. Michael Dorn was cast last, and he was also very frustrated with his role. His agents told him to stick it out. His agents told him that, and he did, but he wanted to leave. There were so many episodes where I was simply standing on my security position saying nothing, not engaged with anything, and I thought, I'll lose my mind doing this for another 6 years. Crosby approached Gene Roddenberry, but as she told IO9, he was set against regular storylines that featured anyone other than the captain. Gene didn't want to change that. He wouldn't budge. Instead, Roddenberry released Crosby from a multi-season contract. It was good of him. He said, I was your age once. I was hungry and ambitious, and I totally get it. You should go for it. Well, there you go. But you know what? Like with Worf, I bet if she stuck it out, Tasha Yar would have had a lot more to do, and they kept bringing her back, so clearly they liked Denise Crosby. Letting an actor out of their contract is one thing. Killing their character so that they cannot return is another. That's what happened to Yar, but it very nearly happened to a different character instead. Well, Tasha Yar was killed off, but... spoiler alert. That's what happened to Yar, but very nearly happened to a different character instead. Jean thought we had one too many women on the show, Sirtis revealed, telling IO9 she was convinced she was going to get fired in season 1. As Troy was gradually written out of episodes, Sirtis recalls that producers started avoiding her. My agent called Roddenberry and said, "What can we do?" And he said, "Look, I have to do what's best for the show." Yet before the ask could fall on Troy, Crosby left the show. Denise quitting is the reason we're talking now, says Sirtis. She saved my job. Had Crosby not left The Next Generation, the show would have been very different, and it's possible that either Troy or Crusher wouldn't have made it through season 1 alive. According to Crosby, Roddenberry was eager to kill Yar once he knew she was leaving. He'd never done it before with one of his regular characters. It would be shocking because it was so unprovoked and so sudden. And indeed, it was. With Sirtis on the rocks before Crosby quit, was Roddenberry planning on killing Troy off instead? Or would Crusher have been killed when Maurice Hurley gave Roddenberry his ultimatum about firing McFadden? We may never know, but there's something very uncomfortable about all the tales Crosby, Sirtis, McFadden, and Farrell have to tell, in which a woman went up against the boys' club and her character was either killed or shoved out. How things have changed. That was then. So what has changed in the last few decades? Well, for one thing, 7 of 9 isn't in a catsuit anymore, which Ryan is happy about. I'm delighted beyond words that there's no catsuit involved in Picard. I think it's much more appropriate, the way the character's dressed now, and it's perfect for what she's been through. A far cry from her impractical catsuit in Voyager, Picard's iteration of 7 is comfortable and ready for action. And just like when she was added to Voyager, 7's inclusion in Picard led to a spike in interest and a shift in publicity. But there's something very satisfying in the fact that she didn't need to be dressed in a catsuit for this to happen. Much of this is due to the success of her character on Voyager, but this also proves how our attitude for female representation has changed. Now producers can't get away with the kind of costume that 7 was squeezed into on Voyager, or the pin-up publicity that invited talk show hosts to openly lust after Ryan to her face. Of how things have changed, Ryan said, "It was a different industry back then, and we've evolved. Thank God, not enough, but we're getting there." Yes. And McFadden agrees. When I think of Discovery and Picard, women have evolved so much. Having fought for better representation when she was on The Next Generation, McFadden is delighted to discover how things have changed in Picard. These women are characters before their gender. That's wonderful progress. Sirtis, who joined the CBS All Access show for one episode, is likewise impressed. With Picard, we have equality. Old Baldy, Sir Old Baldy, he's the first one on the call sheet, but other than that, we're equal. There are men and women, and there's not a preponderance of one sex over the other. Though it has a male lead, Picard is remarkably female-driven. In the main cast, Picard has 4 men and 3 women, but the recurring cast members feature prominently, and of these, 4 are women and only 2 are men. What's more, there's completely parity of screen time. If anything, women get more screen time than the men. Ilsa Brianna's newcomer to the show and television told IO9 she found this approach refreshing, although initially she was concerned that her character Soji would be born sexy yesterday. We could have so easily fallen into that trope, making her this childlike girl who doesn't know anything, who's just following men, she said. Arguably, 7 of 9 fulfills this trope in Voyager as the childlike outsider who has to be taught how to be human. But 7 is far from this in Picard, as is Soji, the android girl who thinks herself human. Brianna's told us Soji's going through her own journey to find out who she is on her terms. I think it's beautiful that you can get characters like that now, and you don't have to put them in skimpy outfits and make them a sex object. It's not just a shift in social perceptions that has led to this change in female representation. There are also better opportunities for women within the industry, as McFadden pointed out. There are so many more mentions for young women nowadays, or mentors for young women nowadays. I wanted to direct so badly, and I asked for it in my very first season, and I was not given it. McFadden would eventually direct only 1 episode of Next Generation, while her male peers directed multiple episodes. Frakes, in particular, used this experience to launch a prolific career as a director, proving how powerful these early opportunities can be. Jonathan Frakes went to Rick Berman over and over and over and over and over again, trying to become a director on that show. Rick Berman said no. It wasn't until he went to what was called Paramount University, where he had to shadow everybody who worked on the show in major positions to learn how to direct. Rick Berman put him through hell. And it was Jeannie Francis, Jonathan Frakes' wife, who said, "You know what? He wants you to give up. He wants you to give up, and just to see how dedicated you are, don't give up. So it's not like Jonathan Frakes was just given the opportunity to direct Star Trek The Next Generation. Rick Berman put him through hell. Put him through hell. And the other people that directed had to go to Paramount University too, but they didn't have to undergo the boot camp that Jonathan Frakes had to undergo. So it wasn't like it was a gender issue. Not simply that. Gates McFadden was a choreographer and had worked on movies such as Labyrinth. I mean, if anything, she was probably more qualified of all the cast to direct than anyone else. And she finally directed Genesis in the last season of Next Generation, which is actually a very cool episode. McFadden would eventually direct only one episode of Next Generation, while her male peers directed multiple episodes. Frakes, in particular, used this experience to launch a prolific career as a director, proving how powerful these early opportunities can be. Briones, however, has already found plenty of mentors on the set of Picard, in particular Sirtis, who took the younger actor under her wing. "I was just giving her tips," Sirtis laughed, "little things that I'd gone through that no one told me." And that is very in keeping with Star Trek's tradition of empowering female characters, which we can see even outside the Trek sets. McFadden told IO9 how women will approach her with tales of how Beverly Crusher inspired them to achieve their goals. "I've spoken to so many female surgeons who tell me Beverly gave the idea to pursue a career in medicine. Obviously, their own perseverance made it happen, but seeing Beverly made a difference. It showed them it was possible." Exactly right. And that's what's most important. But it's not just about entering the workplace, as Ryan pointed out. I've heard from so many people on the autism spectrum and the LGBTQ community and trauma survivors who connected with Seven, she said. They so appreciated feeling like they saw themselves on screen because they've always felt like an outsider. I love that Seven has helped people feel like they're not alone. Before Voyager introduced Seven, Tasha Yar was a touchstone for queer people, as Crosby gleefully told us. People would always ask me, was Tasha gay? And I think in that century, is that really a question we're even going to be talking about? No, not in the 24th century. So I always had a little twinkle in my eye about it, and I'd never answer straightforwardly. Straight, gay, bi, listen. She was with an android. What do you call that? So definitely, Tasha Yar would definitely fit in to this show, because I'm sure she would have many stories about what extraterrestrials she hooked up with. Although Star Trek has a checkered history of LGBTQ representation, 7 of 9 was implied to be queer in the Season 1 finale of Picard. Ryan is fully on board with this character's choice for much the same reasons Crosby would get that twinkle in her eye. It always makes perfect sense, Ryan said of 7 of 9 sexuality, because coming from the Borg, that's the perfect character to explore that with, because she wouldn't have grown up with any societal influences one way or another. It is what it is. This is who you love. You're attracted to who you're attracted to, whatever. I'd certainly like to see that story, by the way. I think that'd be a great story, great Star Trek story. New to the franchise and excited for her character's potential, Briones hopes that Soji will similarly be a touchstone for marginalized people. I really identify with Soji because I'm mixed race. As a mixed kid, you're often told, you're not this, you're not that. Soji has felt human her whole life, so how can anyone tell her that she's not? Briones believes that it's important for young people to see Soji going through what they're going through in the heightened environment of space. Of course, it's not just Picard that's fighting a good fight in terms of representation in Star Trek. Although it has a ways to go with its LGBTQ representation, Discovery has blazed another trail through the stars with Sonequa Martin Green helming the show. Here again, we find the tradition of Trek's women inspiring women, as Crosby reflects on her recent reunion with Martin Green. Sonequa said to me, "Tasha was the window into the character I'm playing on Discovery. You really gave me an insight into how to play this character, and I was deeply touched. Considering Tasha's untimely death, her legacy is poignant. We're not leaving it in the past," she said. "We're bringing it into the future. This through line of women, it continues to grow. As we reflect on Star Trek's history of female representation, we see both objectification and inspiring representation. And now, as more women are writing female characters side by side with men, they're just people writing people. It goes to show that the more inclusive we are as a society, the more we'll be able to imagine and build a better future." And isn't that what Star Trek was trying to tell us all along? Yes, it was. That's why I read these articles, because I think she is a decent writer when she's writing about Star Trek. However, it did bother me. It did bother me in this that she was equating Star Trek as being sexist, that the legacy of what went on behind the scenes and how the show was made somehow reflects badly on Star Trek as a franchise as a whole, and saying that it is in fact sexist. I would say that Star Trek as a franchise since 1966 has been at the forefront. It's been trailblazing in terms of its inclusion of everyone, whether it's men, women, mixed race characters, people of different ethnicities. Star Trek is always trying to get there first. And I would hate to see people think that because, yeah, was Gene Roddenberry a horn dog? He was. Rick Berman too. You know, I mean, these are guys that they ran their shops the way they ran their shops. Was it always correct? No, it wasn't always correct. But remember, they were still also in charge of putting out a lot of representations of people that were not on television before they did it. So I think it's important to remember that. And I think, you know, despite the fact that there are many problematic people in the world, human beings are human beings. We're never going to get away from our biology. We're never going to get away from the kind. I mean, I guess we will eventually. We'll become transhuman and we'll digitize our personalities and we'll slough off these physical bodies that will ultimately betray us and lead to our demise. I mean, I certainly, hell, man, if there was a way I could look like Chris Hemsworth, I would. But I mean, there is a way. Actually, I could stop eating bad food and drinking alcohol and work out and go on to the same kind of regimen that he goes on. I mean, I would never be as pretty as him. I could maybe bulk up like he could, but, you know. So I read this article, and I'm just like, I'm torn. A lot of good points here. And the way that certain women were treated on the set, not a good thing. But then again, there is also the reality of the entertainment business. And there's Chris Hemsworth is not going to be cast as Thor if he doesn't work out for 6 months and bulk up. That's just the way things are, because that's how we expect our superheroes to look. As much as we might want to be progressive about it, I mean, you know, dudes were as pissed off. I mean, it was dudes who didn't like Fat Thor. I've heard more than women. It was the dudes. They're like, I don't like that, because we're dudes. We're visual people. Anyway, what do you guys think about this article? I would suggest everybody read Eleanor Tremeer's work. She's written a lot about Star Trek, and while sometimes she's made me very pissed off, I think her takes are worth reading. And so there are a lot of them. They're on Gizmodo, and check her out. I think she's an interesting voice, although, again, I have a love-hate relationship with what she writes. But she's definitely writing some great stuff, great analysis about the current state of Star Trek. Not a lot of it I agree with, but it's good analysis, and it's worth reading. So check her out. By the way, I'll put this article in the live chat, and I want you guys to check her out. Read her work. It's worth reading, even if it pisses you off. Hold on. Get in there. And here you go. And there are links you can go and follow her. Oh wait, somehow it hasn't got. Oh, the link is too long. It's too long for the live chat. Damn it. Well, it's on Gizmodo. The article is called The Sexist Legacy in Star Trek's Progressive Universe, and it's by Eleanor Tremeer. So check her out. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I've got letters to read to you. That's right, letters today. Let's just see what you guys have to say, because I'm always curious. Jermaine K. is here. Jermaine K. writes, "Hello, Rob. Thanks for reading my previous letters and for giving your opinions on two of my favorite James Bond movies, The Man with the Golden Gun and For Your Eyes Only. I'm a lifelong Bond fan, but could never really get into Diamonds Are Forever. What are your opinions of that movie?" Ooh, I liked Diamonds Are Forever when I was a kid, but boy, it's a tough watch now. Yeah, it's not one of my favorite Bonds. Although I like the moon buggy. I had the corgi of the moon buggy. Quick second topic for this letter. Are there any non-superhero characters from pop culture's past that could be a big deal in 2020 and beyond? I'm thinking of characters like the Green Hornet, Dick Tracy, or the Shadow. Do you think any of these characters or any others could have modern resurgence? Personally, I'd love to see a modern take on the Green Hornet that really respected the source material. By the way, on Robservations 466, you called The Rise of Skywalker a truly wretched film. That was generous of you, Rob. The entire sequel trilogy deserves criticism. The Force Awakens started everything off in a horrid direction. Take care. Well, Jermaine, I don't disagree with you there. I think The Shadow could be really cool now. I mean, I think the Green Hornet, the Green Hornet's a little bit more, well, the Shadow's pulpy too, but I could see a character like the Shadow, a modern version of Lamont Cranston. It's Lamont Cranston, right? I would love to see a modern version of the Shadow, like a TV show, a Netflix series. I think that'd be amazing. I mean, you could even go back and see what they did, what DC Comics did with the Shadow, which was really, really cool. So yeah, I would definitely see that. Yeah. Let's see. Who's here now? Omar94. Hi, Rob. I'm writing this letter to inform everyone that July 16th, 2020, today, marks the 10th anniversary of Christopher Nolan's Inception, which was released on July 16th, 2010. Wow. The movie went on to be one of the top 10 grossing movies of 2010, grossing well over $800 million. It also won 4 Oscars for visual effects, cinematography, sound editing, and sound mixing. It was even nominated for Best Picture, Original Screenplay, Original Score, and Art Direction. Even after all these years, the movie still confuses me. Don't get me wrong, I do still like the movie, but it's still very confusing, especially since there is an ambiguous ending. Thanks. Live long and prosper. Well, you know what, Omar? I would ask you to read, if you can find it, maybe I have it on my computer somewhere, Jonathan Nolan's original draft of Interstellar that Steven Spielberg was going to direct, because it's very different. I am not the biggest fan of Interstellar. In fact, I would say I think it's my least favorite Christopher Nolan film, because I don't think the ending works at all. I liked it up to that point, but the original script, I think, does a much better job. So, yeah. Now, this next letter comes from Jitsi Lemons, Jitse. What a cool name, Jitsi Lemons. I think I got that right. Is it Jitsi? I probably am destroying your name, but it's a cool name. Hello, Mr. Burnett. During this corona lockdown, I had the luminous idea to make illustrations of my favorite YouTubers and had some requests. And, of course, you are one of them. Uh-oh. It took me a while to finish yours since I found that your face was pretty hard to get right. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think I achieved some resemblance, at least in the style. Since I can't upload images here, you can find it via this OneDrive link if you wish. There's a 72 DPI PNG and a 300 DPI PNG PDF inside. As I stated to the others, do with it as you wish. The image is yours. I'm merely putting a JPEG on my portfolio site with the others, linking to your YouTube channel. Hope everything is fine with your family and yourself over there, and that there will be many Robservations and others to come, although I do have a hefty backlog. Greetings from Belgium. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm following this link. Let's see if I can download it. Uh-oh, it says the folder's empty. Oh, what a bummer. It says the folder's empty. There's nothing there. I don't know what to tell you. Well, maybe it still hasn't uploaded. Well, look, I eagerly await seeing your work. I can't. The folder's empty now. I apologize. I should have done this live on the air. This is no reflection on you. So anyway, but thank you for that. That's very flattering. Very flattering. I would like to have seen the work. I will come and find it later. I'll probably end up putting it on the show tomorrow if it's there. Desmond Harris is here. Hi, Toy Man. Due to studios being heavily crippled throughout the corona situation, halting production, does this open the door to older movies, independent or mainstream genre, from years past, 3 to 5 years ago, that did not get picked up for distribution? I would say so. I would absolutely say so. These movies would likely not require much resources to get released, as they are finished and ready for distribution, which could be a way to make up for lost earnings if obtained at the right price. It also, understandably, is why studios passed on the movies, as they were maybe not any good or just not a fit for studio direction. However, situations have changed and money has to flow with some studios in order to stay in business, or those films left where they are. Your thoughts? Kind regards, and thanks for sharing your time and insights. Well, Desmond, I think you're right. Look, movies still have to be good. Like, no one's gonna pick up a wretched film that is ineptly made or it just isn't good at all. People aren't going to do that. But there are films that were good that kind of fell through the cracks that nobody really realized, like, who's the audience for this movie? Where's this movie going to go? So I do think you're absolutely right about that. I think that there is an opportunity for a lot of movies that might have been sitting on shelves to come out. Without saying anything, I might be working on a film just like that right now. A film I really haven't talked about much. But, yes, working on something that actually won some festival awards and is actually a great movie, but it never got distribution. And I'm working on helping it get distribution. So, yes, I think that we will see more and more of that, which can only be a good thing. I mean, look, movies are so hard to make. It always kills me when one doesn't get seen or it sits on a shelf and we never get to experience it, which is, always kind of a bummer. Now, I know there's a lot of people who have been firing chats and things into me, so why don't we jump into those and see what you guys have to say? Nick Parrish is here. What's up, Rob? Once again, Nick Parrish brings you news you shall be pleased to hear. There is now hope we can calm this virus sooner than later. Per multiple news sites, it looks like finally all the big retailers are mandating masks in all locations. Now, Rob, I know since you're in California, it's been state mandate to wear masks, but where I'm at, I've still been going to the grocery store and other places and seeing half the people and some employees not wearing masks. So I think this is huge. Look, man, I agree with you. I've been talking about our local Vons that we've been going to. I have to say, our local Vons has somebody outside the front door who greets you, is sanitizing, using sanitizer on all the carts, and then gives you a shot of hand sanitizer when you go in. And at all the checkout counters, there's hand sanitizer to blast your hands with as you go out. And I'll tell you, they've been doing that since the beginning. So good on Vons. If you want to sponsor this channel, I'm not adverse to that. But I've been very impressed by our East Pasadena Vons that's on, I think it's on Sierra Madre. They do a fantastic job, and I've been very impressed by them. Willow said, have you watched The Old Guard? When I haven't, I not all the way. Whenever I see immortal characters, I want to know what happens if they get their head cut off, or if they get their head cut in half, if they get blown up into pieces, if they get incinerated into ashes. Well, one of my favorite things, how they deal with that, is in Torchwood, Children of Earth, because Captain Jack Harkness, one of my man crushes, he gets into that situation. But I would love to see that too. I mean, I've always believed that. I mean, can immortal characters survive getting your head cut off? I would say probably. It depends. Like in the Old Guard, I guess they do. Like your body would grow back. But I would think that it was something if your brain was destroyed, that would kind of be the end of you. That's at least I would think something like that. I mean, I don't know why I think that, but I kind of do. But yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think if they do another Immortal movie, they need to answer these kinds of questions. Factual Opinion is here. It's too bad Troy and Beverly got to do jack shit in the TNG movies. I agree with you. I don't think they had good roles at all. And that was a mistake. It was a mistake. I mean, I liked, when you had like Deanna Troi front and center in an episode like Face of the Enemy, or when Dr. Crusher was in Remember Me. I thought those actresses, both Marita Sirtis and Gates McFadden, could definitely step up and be given more to do. But, Star Trek also was fighting against the ultimate, the triumvirate of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. It was, in Next Generation, there was definitely part of that. Geordi, I thought, always got the short end of the stick, too. So, yeah. Omega Relay tipped and said it was bizarre to hear Starfleet didn't allow female captains, according to TOS. Thank the Lords of Kobol, Enterprise retconned it. I don't think that's necessarily true. Everyone says that a lot because what Janice Lester said in the last episode of Star Trek Turnabout Intruder, this world doesn't allow women into this world of Starfleet captains. I think there were female Starfleet captains in Star Trek. We just didn't see it. We did in the movies. Of course, there was a female Romulan commander who commanded a fleet, or at least a group of Romulan vessels in the Enterprise incident in the third season. And I think while we didn't see female starship commanders, I never thought, even as a kid, I never thought that there weren't any, because we saw female characters doing lots of other things. I just think we just didn't wind up seeing one. But I definitely think that they were there. I've always thought that. I mean, but then again, there was no evidence of that. I just thought that was always the case. I don't think they ever didn't allow women. That was only stated in Turnabout Intruder, and I don't know if I buy it. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, I would actually like to see a superhero with mental superpowers be physically out of shape. Maybe one member of the super team could have a beer belly or a flabby ass. It could be the basis of some interesting dialogue. Well, Stubble, you should pick up, if it ever comes out, the New Warriors comic from Marvel. But yeah, I mean, I could see that. They've done that like in Heroes, the show Heroes. People aren't perfect, and I see that. Hassan is here and says, I prefer beautiful and interesting people in entertainment. I'd much rather watch humans like Charlize Theron, Lupita Nyong'o, Selma Hayek, or John Lithgow, who, by the way, is gorgeous, third rock from the sun joke, than somebody who looks like me or my neighbor. I agree with you. I mean, that's why we watch entertainment. It's larger than life. It's real life, but better. Dario Argento was once accused of being misogynistic because he kills beautiful women in his movies. And he made a joke saying, well, would you want me to kill ugly women in my movies? I mean, movies are full of beautiful people in general. It's not just beautiful women, it's beautiful guys too. We want to see people, we want to see film stars. When we see people up on the screen, we want them to be extraordinary. For me, I'm the viceroy of verisimilitude, so I want to see people that perfectly embody their roles. But yeah, you want to see people, even if they're not the most beautiful people in the world, you want them. Look, I think that there's people of all shapes and sizes, all colors and creeds, that look like they belong on film. And then there's people that don't. And like you could be looking at if you looked at 10 photographs of, try this. Pick 10 of your friends, male or female, and just randomly pick 10 of your friends on Facebook. And of those 10, you have to pick one. But there'll be one that might not necessarily be the prettiest or the most handsome, but I bet there's one that looks like they could be in a movie or a TV show. That you have a friend, maybe as a character actor, because I've seen really beautiful people that their beauty is somewhat not... Again, I always go back to Meryl Streep. I think Meryl Streep, especially as a young woman, was unbelievably striking. She still is today. But she wasn't traditionally beautiful the way... she looked like a movie star. She looked like she belonged on the screen. And that's what I've always liked about her. That's what I've always liked about my favorite actors are you can't imagine anyone else there. And I think a lot of actors aren't necessarily traditionally beautiful in a magazine sort of a way. They're beautiful and they're perfect inhabiting these roles. And I think that's what you want. But yeah, I think beautiful and interesting people in entertainment, that's what you want. You want people that are larger than life, because why else would you be watching stories about them? You want to be swept away by entertainment. So I don't disagree with you, Hassan. John is here, sends in a super chat and says, Nichelle Nichols was going to quit the original series. She ran into Martin Luther King, who talked her out of it because he thought her presence was so important. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And, all actors want more lines. They all want to do more. But if you're not the star of the show, I mean, Morn was on Deep Space Nine for a long time, and he didn't have one line of dialogue. Ross Gecko sends in a super chat and says, Jerry Ryan was sexy in her suit, but in a show with first female captain whose body was not accentuated, there was female diversity. Some dressed sexy, some didn't. Nothing sexist there. Well, that was kind of my point, is that the shows themselves... The shows did everything they could to not be sexist, especially as they moved through time. I mean, look, there's a lot on Star Trek that's problematic, starting with red miniskirts. I get it. The first woman I ever had a crush on was Nichelle Nichols, and, it was never lost on me. When I saw Mirror Mirror and she had her exposed midriff, wow. I mean, I love Nichelle Nichols. I think Nichelle Nichols, you look at her, she is unbelievably gorgeous, especially in the original series. And look at her in a second season episode like Mirror Mirror, man. Va va voom is right. And of course they wanted sex appeal. They were making a TV show in the 60s. That's part of what TV was. But you're right. I mean, the shows themselves did what they could to be progressive. And that's why when you have these clickbaity articles that the sexism was happening behind the scenes. It was happening behind the scenes. They were trying to do whatever they could in front of the camera, but people are people. I'm not condoning that behavior. But remember, I mean, Star Trek out of the '60s was the Mad Men era, and that's what happened. I mean, are things getting better? Yes. Are things evolving? Yes. But I would say, I do feel like we're evolving into a sex-less society. I mean, I like a little zesty eroticism in my days, and I like that. I think people need that. We need to have eroticism in our art and in our entertainment and in our everyday lives. I think it's good. Hassan sends in a tip and says, there's an outbreak at my office. 15 cases so far. And my bosses are a fusion of Trump, Bolsonaro, Bolsonaro? Is that how you say it? Fucking morons. I'm angry, but I have to deal with it because I should be glad I still have a job, I guess. I hope to get tested soon. I assume I'm asymptomatic. Well, Hassan, stay safe. I mean, it boggles my mind. I mean, when history is written, the federal response, the American federal response to this pandemic will be seen as one of the greatest failures of our government ever. And this isn't just me being critical of Trump. I'm critical of the entire federal government because of Trump and his administration. But it's unbelievable. It is unbelievable that we have no federal plan at all. Zero. And I don't understand it. John sends in a very generous super chat. Thank you, sir. Hail R&B. I love the Prisoner stream with Az. I'm definitely going to follow the series. I never finished watching it. I got used to it. YouTube has an order to watch. They have the election episode as the second episode and Big Ben at 7. That's probably better. That's the better episode. Big Ben, the chimes of Big Ben later. For those of you who don't know what John's talking about, Az is another YouTuber who's far more successful than me, but he is a terrific guy, and we were on a live stream together and found out we both love The Prisoner, and he suggested that we do a live stream where we review all 17 episodes, which we're going to do. We did our first show the other day where we just talked about our love of the show, and it went great. I really like collaborating with him. He is a very, very smart guy. So I can't wait to do it. I've got homework I have to do for him, too. So we'll get there. But we're going to do it bi-weekly. And also tonight, we didn't do whining about movies yesterday because we both were just too damn busy. And tonight we're talking about David Cronenberg's Crash at 7 p.m. tonight, finally. So you can come hear us then talk about it. So I'm sorry we didn't go on last night. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, in Star Wars and other fantasy movies and shows, there are some dialects that won't work. I can imagine a generic American, English, Scottish, and Irish dialect. Some regional accents and national accents work, but a Texan, Boston, or Essex accent wouldn't work. I don't know, man. I don't know. That's not a very good Texas accent, but I agree with you. You know, we have been because of movies and TV, we have been conditioned to expect certain kinds of accents. Like, I don't know if Cockney rhyming slang would work in a galaxy far, far away. I think you're right. And from as far as an English language speaker goes, I think we have a prejudice against proper Old English or English as spoken by British actors. To me, you can never go wrong with a proper British accent in space or wherever you are. So I agree with you. I think Stubble, you can't. What about Swedish? Do you think a Swedish accent could work? You didn't say that. I wonder if it could. Mukbang is here, and he sends in a super chat. Prince song of the day is "I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man." Update too soon. Are you gonna buy the? Did you get the Purple Rain? I mean the 1999, and have you pre-ordered the Sign of the Times extended editions? Because that Sign of the Times looks insane. You got to get that. Nick Parrish says, so Rob, I just found out there was an X-rated cover of Savage Dragon 225 showing Malcolm Dragon having a buck-nasty oral sex-filled orgy with several women. The cover is so insane, it reminded me that the limitless artistic freedom is why I love comics. I have not seen that, but now I will look for it. Mukbang also sends in a review, and Mukbang says, Please explain your amazing T-shirt. Thanks. I got this. Okay, as everybody knows, one of the things I really love to do is find nerdy T-shirts. And I always like nerdy T-shirts, but when I work with John Schnepp on Collider, on Heroes, AMC Heroes, and then Collider Heroes, he always had awesome geeky shirts. So I really had to step up my geeky shirt game. And whenever I see a shirt that I need to get that's clever, that you'd have to know what it is, like this, you'd have to see Robert Eggers' The Witch, who directed The Lighthouse. His first feature, The Witch, has a demonic goat named Black Phillip. And and when I saw this shirt, I'm like, I love The Witch. The Witch, I think, is a great movie. I had to get this. I had to get this. That's Black Phillip's dark roast coffee, and it says drink deliciously here. I'm like, okay. One of the things I like about certain shirts, like I don't just like Star Trek and have a picture of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy on them. That's not cool. I like when people do clever things. Like somebody thought about Black Phillip, and there was a lot of Black Phillip memes and everything, but the idea that Black Phillip has his dark roast coffee, drink deliciously, I had to have it. And I got it right before I went on this show. I actually changed my shirt to put this on to wear today. I was so happy to get this. And there's a lot of these cool shirts that pop up on my Facebook feed. I guess once you buy one, they know. And so if I get a lot, I don't buy a lot of them, but when they're good, I think that would be awesome. It's when I see an awesome shirt, I have to get it. Like this was like, oh my God, I have to have this. Bunyan Snipe sends in a super chat and says, Kent Allard pretending to be Lamont Cranston. That could work. That could work. What do you think? Do you think that the shadow would work? Do you think that you could do that, Bunyan? Jason Bueno sends in a super chat and says, Rob, to shorten a long link, Google tiny URL. Enjoy. Yes, I could have done that, but in the show, when I try and put in a URL over here, because of I'm broadcasting, it gets a little slow, and it gets a little held up. Commander Claudius is here. He is one half of the official greatest couple as far as the Burnettwork is concerned. Commander Claudius sends in a tip and says, Bonjour, Robert. Great topic. Is Star Trek progressive? Progress is defined as advance or development toward a better, more complete, or modern condition, or forward or onward movement toward a destination. So I would say overall, yes. Well, I agree with you. I do agree with you. And I think Star Trek is very progressive. And could it be more progressive? Sure. But remember, don't put your progressive agenda in front of your characters and your story. Star Trek was great for 50 years because it didn't do that. And I've said, like, Deep Space Nine, one of the greatest representations of not only a father, a single father, a widowed father and his son, but a black father and his son. They never, other than doing an episode called Far Beyond the Stars that Avery Brooks himself directed, they never made a big deal that Avery Brooks was black. And there was a lot of, Brock Peters was his dad. There was a lot of representation on Deep Space Nine. And you know what they weren't doing? Going, oh, look at our show. We have such great representation on it. No, it just was. That's the best kind of representation. You're right, Claude. Star Trek is very progressive. Always has been. And I think, in a way, new Star Trek isn't nearly as progressive because they're shouting to the high hills, look at how progressive we are. And once you're doing that, you're missing the point. Your progression becomes more important than the characters and stories you're telling. Let the characters and stories speak for you. It's obvious. You don't have to tell people that Star Trek's progressive. It's always been progressive. And I think when you have to tell people, well, look at how progressive we are, you've lost that war already. Let your work speak for itself. Anthony Gonzalez is here. Hey, Rob, say Disney Marvel executives call you the second we get out of the chat and say, Rob, we need you to cast Mark Spector, Marlene, Frenchie, and Bushman. Who you got? Ooh. Wow. That is a tough one. Gosh, who would I cast? That's pretty beyond. You know what? I can't off the top of my head. I can't. You know what? You know who I might cast as Mark Spector? Michael Fassbender. I know he's played Magneto. He might be a little too old. But I think I could believe him as a desert mercenary. also a rich, debonair dude. I could see that. And, yeah. Because, see, that's a tough one. I don't know, man. I got to come back to you, Anthony. I got to think about that. I got to play Cast Moon Knight. That's a tough one. I have to think about that. Mukbang is here and says, you have lots of new viewers and mods here. Welcome them. Well, new viewers, my name is Robert Meyer Burnett. I want to welcome you to, you've just become members, whether you know it or not, of the Post-Geek Singularity, which is my audience here. You are imagination connoisseurs all. And what does that mean? Well, the Post-Geek Singularity is something I just made up after, it comes after Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near, actually, is the book, the title of the book. And basically that's about when AI achieves sentience and what will happen. But I believe that we live in the post-geek singularity, because when I was growing up, geeky things were a fringe, you know, comic books, Star Trek. Star Wars wasn't so much, but role-playing games, not anymore. Now it's become the norm. You know, everyone watches anime. Everybody plays video games. Everybody watches Star Trek. Endgame is the biggest movie of all time. So we live in the post-geek singularity, but true connoisseurs of all of it, of which you all are, because if you weren't, you wouldn't be watching this channel, I call imagination connoisseurs, because you like Flights of Fancy, but you like it curated. You like the best of it. You know, you're not just going to watch anything because there's a spaceship in it or a superhero in it. You want to watch the best of the best. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy a movie like Star Crash, because, hey, I love Star Crash, as everyone knows, but you like things that are good. So, Mukbang, thank you for pointing that out. And, yes, there are new mods. I appreciate them. People like Robert Priso, I welcome them as well. I hope the job today wasn't that hard. Kinky Sphincter sent in a super chat and says, I saw Luc Besson's Anna movie. It was awesome. Love the action. I haven't seen it, and I love Luc Besson. It's the only Luc Besson film that I haven't seen. I got to own it. It came out. I want to own it. I like his movies. I was really surprised how good it was. I wouldn't imagine it would be bad. It looked good to me, so I need to see it. I have not seen it. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, so we're halfway through July. Do you think we'll get a Dune teaser trailer in these last 2 weeks of July? The spice must flow in the same way that movies must flow for Hollywood to survive. Stubble, I would love nothing more than to see a Dune trailer, as you know. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get one. I mean, I would like to get one. I think they have to figure out, are there going to be any movies coming out this year? I don't know. The United States pretty much has ruined that for everybody. We have not done a good job here, so we'll see. Royce Freeman sends in a super chat and says, what do you think of diversity for the sake of diversity so that every movie has equal representation? Can some be only one group without diversity? Well, here's my feeling is, in terms of diversity, I want the best characters. I want the best actors to play the characters that most serve the story. Now, and as the viceroy of verisimilitude, I like it. I like seeing diverse casts. I find diverse casts interesting. You know, I also am a fan. I love mixed race people, just in general. I think from a movie standpoint, like, they look cool. You know, I like mixed race people. I think they're interesting. They're interesting looking. I mean, I've always believed that if you think about it, when people can travel freely, eventually everybody's going to be intermixed, and our genetic pool, I think our genetic pool isn't diverse enough. I think people have to do a whole lot more fucking with each other, to be honest. We got to get the entire human race's gene pool. We got to step it up, because if we're going to become a spacefaring civilization, we got to make sure that all of the dominant traits in humanity have to, like, intermix and create the so I never understood why. I never believed in racial purity. I'm like, what is that? Racial purity is the human race. The entire, what you want is a mix of everybody to get the best genes from everyone. If you're just having like I've never understood racial purity. What does that mean? You're going to be one color? I'm like, give me a break, man. That's not good. You got to get everybody intermixed. Get everybody together. Let's have one big planetary orgy and create an intermixed species and travel out into the stars where all of our best genetics go out with us. That's what I think. So anyway, you were asking about diversity for the sake of diversity. I mean, look, I think movies and TV should reflect real life. I think if you go out into the world, you don't just see one kind of person. You see all kinds of people. And as the viceroy of verisimilitude, I would not. I mean, it really depends. It depends. Like if you're making a movie, having been to South Korea now, if you're making a movie in South Korea, I don't necessarily think that you would have a very diverse cast, at least by the 12 days or whatever I spent there. You'd want to have a predominantly South Korean cast. But I think if you walk out into any major metropolitan city in the United States, there's a diverse group of people. You can have anybody. And I think it's cool. I like that. But I don't like, forced diversity. No, I think you should make movies and television, whatever serves the story best. I think that's best. If you want to have only one group, if that works for the story, fine. I just think it might be a little weird. Like I go back and watch movies in the past, like in the 40s and 50s and things. The lack of diversity frequently gets in my way. I'm like, But then I understand when the movie was made, and I get it. Austin Hernandez sends in a super chat. Thank you so much, and says, Rob, I didn't think Next Gen was sexist. They had a planet where women were the alpha gender and men were smaller and weaker. Yeah, but don't hold up Angel 1 as a paragon of virtuous Star Trek. Although I gotta say, Jonathan Frakes' ensemble in that, to die for. What an outfit that is. Just Google TNG Angel 1 Riker. Wow, what an outfit. I think it empowered women and showed positive views, in my opinion. I agree with, maybe not that episode. That episode was interesting. Even the episode everybody cites as being so horribly racist, Code of Honor, is about a matriarchal society ultimately, and that's kind of interesting. I think that's the one saving grace of that episode. Yeah, like Gates McFadden said, people watch Star Trek, and the very fact that a woman was the ship's doctor, that in itself becomes empowering to audience members, and I think that's good. Star Trek has always done that, and I think it's good. Mukbang says, beautiful people still need tons of heavy makeup and hair work to look presentable on TV. Totally. What people don't understand, and it fascinates me to no end, between every shot, every setup in a film, when you're setting up a shot, you do a take, there's makeup and hair people that zhuzhes everybody after every take. Movies are fake. People are looking. They're larger than life by design. Stub McShave says, I watched Sex Education with Gillian Anderson a while back. I think Gillian looks sexier now as a woman in her 50s than she ever did in X-Files. Oh, I agree with you. Gillian Anderson is smolderingly hot in that show. Sex Education is a great show. They are going to do it. They're doing a third season of it. What a great show. I don't know if it has to do with that she exudes more confidence and surety in herself. I think it probably does. I think people are sexiest when they do get older. When the people are younger, they don't carry around the knowledge. They don't walk with that knowledge that they get as they progress through life. But I agree with you. I'm a big fan of Gillian Anderson. I think women in their 50s are peak women. Not to say women when they're younger are great too, but when women get into their 50s, there's just something about them, the combination of experience and knowledge and beauty. I've got a huge crush on Charlotte Rampling, and what is she, like in her 70s? Even though, she's going to be in Dune. How cool is that? So I agree with you. Senor Claudius is here. Robert, we watch Sophia Loren movies because it's Sophia Loren. She may not be the most beautiful woman in the film, but she is one of the most attractive women to ever star in cinema. I agree. Along with Nichelle Nichols, she expanded the audience's idea of beauty. Oh, I agree. Again, Sophia Loren is she's unbelievable. And she's magnetic on the screen. Oh, my God. Was Divorce Italian Style? Did I just find my Blu-ray of Divorce Italian Style? Yeah, no, you can't go wrong with Sophia Loren. And I think that's, it's interesting. That's the thing. When you put people on film, it might not be the most traditionally beautiful person, but you can tell by looking at them, and Sophia Loren is definitely one, that they belong on screen. They just have something going. Justin Toner sends in a super chat and says, Criterion Sale Hall number 2, Bruce Lee set. I ordered that. In the Heat of the Night, I already have that. On the Waterfront, I have that. Red River, The Brood, A Face in the Crowd, and The Breakfast Club, on the way in the mail. Oh, and the last name is pronounced like paper toner. So Justin Toner. There you go. Well, Justin, I'll try and not get that wrong. That is a great list. You know what? You just reminded me. I was thinking about what was the Criterion title that I want that I haven't bought yet, and it was A Face in the Crowd. I got to get Face in the Crowd. You're going to love that Red River set, and the Brood's great, too. They're all great, actually. I can't wait to get that Bruce Lee set. I'm stoked, beyond stoked. Honest Asian Guy's here. Honest Asian Guy says, hey, Rob, do you think 90s King Kong or Godzilla could have worked with high-speed puppets and animatronics and miniatures? Would it still hold up? Yeah. I mean, I think it really depends. I mean, I looked at the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, and that's live action and puppets, and that worked. I think it could have. I mean, we did get 90s King Kong or Godzilla with man in suit, but I think it could have. Depends how it's done, or maybe a combination of puppets and some kind of something else. But yeah, it could have. Depends. It really depends on the execution. Nick Parrish sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, if you want to find that X-rated Savage Dragon 225 cover, just type in Savage Dragon 225 variant cover D in Google, because I think the comic site I found it on took the cover down. Oh, well, there you go, everybody. I can't do it on the show, but you look up Savage Dragon 225 variant cover D in Google and feast your eyes on that. Royce Freeman is here and says, I'm looking to buy Star Trek The Undiscovered Country Director's Cut on Blu-ray. Is it available on any of the Blu-rays or box sets? To my knowledge, it is not. The only Director's Cut, Star Trek 2 is out, but Star Trek 6 is only available on that double disc DVD. I vastly prefer the Director's Cut of Star Trek 6. For those of you who don't know, Renee Auberjonois is in Star Trek 6 as Colonel West and is revealed to be one of the Federation architects behind the assassination attempt, the assassination of Gorkon and the cabal that wants to derail any peace between the Klingons and the Federation. And it's really good. So, Royce, I don't think so. Anthony Gonzalez sends in a tip and says, speaking of empowering, just watch Aliens. The Marine pilot, the female, the Marine medic, female, the most badass Marine grunt, Vasquez, female, and, of course, Lieutenant Ripley. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love the women in Aliens. I thought they were great. That was great representation. Same with Starship Troopers. There's a lot of female representation in that, including one of my favorite unsung character actresses, Brenda Strong. Not Brenda Song, she's a different girl, but Brenda Strong. She was the commander, Roger, what's it called? Not the Roger Dodger. The Roger, whatever the name of the ship is that Denise Crosby's on. The Roger Young? Yeah, I love Brenda Strong. She's awesome. But yeah, I completely agree with you. Bunyan Snipes sends in a tip and says, in my mind, the movie got it the wrong way around. He changes his face to look like the Shadow, whereas in my mind, Kent Allard changes his face to look like his old army buddy, Lamont Cranston, who is an Elon Musk type who wishes to avoid the limelight. That's cool. I like that idea. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. But only the Shadow knows. But I would love to see it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this brings me to the conclusion of Robservations episode number 469. Wow, 469. Only 30. Well, tomorrow is 470. Closing in on 500. I got these interviews. I think you guys are going to love them. We shall see what I will have wrought. But I'm going to do a 500-minute show in the middle of August. See how that goes. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting the channel through tips and super chats. I want to thank everyone for writing letters. Oh, wait. I just remembered. You know what? I have another letter. I do have another letter, and you'd be shocked to know who it's from. Shocked. I'm telling you, there's gambling going on here. But I have one more letter, and I'm going to read it to you before I sign off. And let me get it. See, I thought I was done. It must be a joke how I never sign off on time. I just never do. This letter, ladies and gentlemen. That's not the right one. Hang on. Wait. Okay, now I'm going to get it right. See, it's hard. It's tough. This one comes from Ian Samuels, ladies and gentlemen. Rob and fellow Robservationists. Censorship can be a minefield that the Monty Python gang had to deal with through the BBC regulators. One of the strangest stories, which highlights more about the regulators and the writers, was a sketch written by Eric Idle. The sketch is making fun of TV wine tasters. So the taster is going around a winery in France and tries a white, swills it around, spits it out, and in a comedic French accent announces that it tastes like pee-pee. Suggesting it tastes like urine, he tries a red, swills it around in his mouth and spits it out and announces tastes like pee-pee. He tries a rosé and tastes it, swills it around his mouth and spits it out and announces it tastes like pee-pee. The regulators wouldn't allow it to be shown on the series. The reason they gave was that when the taster tries the rosé, the liquid in the glass looks like a woman's period water. They had no issue with the content of the sketch, but as far as they were concerned, that was what rosé looked like. I say this example tells you more about the regulators than the writers. Wow, I didn't know that. That's crazy. That's kind of gross too. Anyway, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I'm sure that's in a Monty Python thing. Phage Lives sends in a super chat and says, I went to the pic of Savage Dragon 225 on your Facebook Messenger. Oh, you sent it to me on Facebook Messenger. Well, thank you, Phage Lives. I appreciate that. I look forward to watching that. Well, listen, I want to thank my moderating staff, of course, Mike Bodden, Greg Smith, Jordy Lyons, and then, of course, the Richard. We got Robert Pariso here, who's a new moderator. I don't know if we have more. Mr. Derringer is here, too. I want to thank you guys for moderating the chat. I hope it wasn't too bad today. And I want to thank everybody, all of you imagination connoisseurs, for being here. I will be back on the John Campea Show tomorrow, and I will be back here tomorrow. And then, of course, tonight, join us, ladies and gentlemen. Join Elizabeth, the ace, the arbiter of cinematic excellence, and she's also my enchantress. And we will be talking about David Cronenberg's very controversial 1996 film, Crash. So join us for that tonight at 7 p.m. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind souls from across the 28 known galaxies, however you identify, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say, have a better day. And I mean that. I mean that sincerely. I do.